Jess, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here with the C47, and welcome to my first live stream of 2018. There's a lot to talk about here, and hopefully a few people will show up at least, and we can have some shop talk and go over some things. Just a couple of little pieces of housekeeping here. Number one, I'm Jem Schofield, and my website is theC47.com. It's a free resource having to do with information and education and consulting and production related to the craft of video production and filmmaking. And I am sponsored, at least for this episode, from our fine friends over at RØDE microphones, and also with the software solution that I use for live streaming, which is called Mimo Live, from the fine people over at Boinks Software. So here we are, and it is 2018. The first thing I will tell you is that the Q&A is open to questions at any time, so feel free to type your questions in the chat. And I have somebody here who's going to help me in terms of posting links if there are links that need to be posted. But this is really going to be, well, we'll see how the questions go, but it's going to be a relatively short episode. It's going to have a lot to do with sort of where I am and what I'm doing and sort of what's coming up and things like that. So again, please ask questions at any time. I'd love to answer them. That's a big part of doing the live streams. And if you have been to any of the live streams last year, you will and have been familiar with something called Camera and Flask, which I do with my good friends Caleb Pike from DSLRvideoshooter.com, and also my fine friend Ben Barden, who is really in the Czech Republic most of the time, but still hops over to England for projects and family and things like that. So that show will be coming back in the future. Part of that equation is going to be this, hopefully, space, which is the Mcminnville community media, and it is basically a local cable channel in the town that I now live in Mcminnville, Oregon. And I think that we have the bandwidth here to be able to do live streams, which has been one of the big problems that I've had. Now, I do see that there are just a few people who are watching right now. If somebody could please type into the chat whether or not this is a clean stream and it seems to be working properly, that would be fantastic. So, Eric, I'm actually in front of one palm. That's... I can't believe you're saying this, because when I walked into the studio space, the first thing I did was make a joke about between two palms. And I might have to keep this as part of the set for at least the C47 live stream. And it's good to hear from you, Eric. Eric, is the picture quality pretty decent here, or is it all fuzzy and messed up and everything else? And right now, for some reason, I decided to have this on a 30-second delay, because last year my internet was so crappy that I had to do a buffer, but I think I might take that away in the future. So while I'm waiting for some feedback on the quality of the live stream, and maybe I will call this in front of one palm, or between one palm is even better, Eric. I might get sued, though. Pretty good. Okay, so hi from Russia. Very surprised to see your C200 tutorials on Canon's channel finally. Hey, Den. Funny you should mention that. I have on deck here a link to those C200 tutorials, and people, it's pretty interesting, actually. I've done a lot of tutorial videos for Canon in the past, and this is the first time where I've had a lot of requests in terms of whether or not I was doing a tutorial series on a particular camera system, because I've been doing them for Canon since their DSLRs came out. I did, it's a tad fuzzy, That's me, Eric. That has nothing to do with the live stream. That's why it's a tad fuzzy. And I haven't had any scotch today, but I'm just telling you that it's probably me. Okay, but it is a tad fuzzy. I'm on a straight Ethernet connection, so we'll just have to keep doing some more tests. I'm at a 1280 by 720 stream, and I'm wondering if I make some changes in the future, if that will help in terms of data rate. But we'll get this licked at some point, but at least no dropouts. Okay, so back to what I was talking about, Canon C200 videos. How about the audio? Is the audio okay? Do we have a decent audio? Yeah, look at that. The audio's kind of dog poo a little. I mean, not the audio, the stream. I can't change it live, I don't think. It's not going to let me. It's not going to happen. All right, guys, this is sort of a guinea pig test, too. I don't want to stop the stream, so I'll have to deal with this, but I'll bump the data rate up on the next live stream that I do. So we'll get that all sorted out for the next one. Okay, so C200 tutorials are up. There's 8 videos in total. Lots of people asking about whether or not they were going to go up, and they are now live, and there is a link there in the chat, so you can go check that out. Yes, I do need scotch. You probably need scotch. You need Jack Daniels, Eric. So I'm happy with these tutorials, and I actually have been using the C200 as my main A camera for a lot of production lately as well, and I like it so much, I think I'm going to be getting another one. So let's talk about what's happened in the last 6 to 9 months. White balance is changing because I'm using the built-in iSight camera on the MacBook Pro. So that's going to be happening. I do have a Logitech webcam, which is the 930E as in Edward, which I do like very much, but they've changed their software, and I will get that also worked out by the next live stream. So that's good feedback, though. So I have got a question from DSLR Films. I have a question. I am 17 years old and am living in the Netherlands. I wonder, is it smart to go to film school and go through tough selection or just work a lot? That's a great question. I think the answer to that question is different for everybody. Honestly, if I had a sense of what I wanted to do when I was 15 or 16 years old, in terms of where I was going to go with my career, I might have actually applied to and tried to go to film school, but I would have done that so that I could work with other people and really figure out what part of filmmaking I was interested in. But as somebody who is older than I care to admit, 46, the landscape was very different back then. So if I had gone into college or university in 1990, the options would have been very different. And I don't know how it is in the Netherlands, but I would imagine it would be similar to what it is in the United States, which is that very, very few people actually get into an application-based film school. And so the chances of you getting into a film school are relatively low. And if you do, it's not always in an application-based film school. It might be cinema studies. So it's more theory-based, and then you have to go and find a way to get that equipment out of there because there may be another program at that school. So, so I will answer that question in a moment then, but you may not like the answer. So film school is really, something that I think if you can get into it, great. But we have now, unlike we did 25, 27 years, 28 years ago, available to us tools that were unaffordable before. And the landscape has completely changed. I mean, I don't need to get into this in this particular live stream, but the access that you have to camera systems and lighting and audio gear, and then more importantly, distribution, is completely different. So, being able to just get out there and do it is a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. And I think you have to trust your instincts. You have to see what opportunities there are out there. If you can get into and working on set, that may be a great way to go. if you can get into a film school, great, but don't let it be the thing that's going to stop you from telling stories and creating content, because there isn't really anything that is going to stop you now. And before, the biggest thing that was going to stop you was financial. So I think that there's a lot to be said about just doing. You know, they say if you're going to be a writer, then write. If you're going to tell stories, tell those stories, and you can do that now without having a lot of money. Steven Soderbergh just shot his last movie on an iPhone. Now, I understand that he had a big crew and access to lighting and a long post-production cycle, but the reality is that you just need to tell stories. Okay, so Dan asked, any tasty rumor leaks on C200 firmware update? I don't know if they're tasty, and it's not really a rumor in the sense that there is a firmware update coming up. Canon has talked a little bit about what that is. It's really, to my knowledge, primarily a codec-based update for the camera system. And that codec-based update will allow for a true sort of 4K, 2K proxy workflow. And then we'll see if there's anything else that comes out. But I would expect it to come to market within the first quarter of the year. I don't know of an actual date, so that's all I've got for you, Dan, on that one. Okay, so where have I been? What have I been doing? Not that you really care, but I'm just going to kind of give you guys an update. Yeah, Eric says best thing to do is just shoot a heck of a lot, and I agree with that. You know, again, if you have the opportunity and you can get into a good film school and you're excited about that, then that's great. So last year, I made a final decision with my family that we were going to move to the other side of the country, which we have obviously done because I'm in Oregon now. We put our house on the market after doing a lot of work to it, and we drove across country twice in 5 weeks. One with our first car and a trailer with my equipment, and then the second time with the second car and a 26-foot box truck, which was basically loaded with 95% of everything that we owned. And we drove across country with our house still on the market in New Jersey and with a house to rent here in Oregon. And that part hasn't changed much. A house in New Jersey is about to be sold. We are going to look for, and I'm excited about finding a studio space so that I can create more in-depth educational content for you as an audience as a C47, but also for my client base. People like Abel Cine and companies like Canon and ZEISS and ARRI and things like that. So there's a lot going on there. And, you know, part of the whole lack of content has sort of been twofold. Number one is that I've been moving my entire family and changing my entire life. And number two is I've been creating a ton of content for other people. So I did 2 full training series for Canon, one on the XF 400/405 camera systems, and then just recently and launched this week the EOS C200/C200B. A lot of content which will be coming out soon for Abel Cine, who I'm doing ongoing content for, and a little bit of content for the C47, but that's starting to change. It is challenging, to say the least, to come up with basically a consistent approach to creating content. And while I did a daily video podcast for 3.5 years, 5 days a week almost, for that entire time, you know, it's important to, you know, understand that I think a lot of people on YouTube and Facebook and things like that who are consistent content creators, we suffer from we are going to do this and we promise we're going to do this and it's going to be every week or it's going to be every Wednesday. And then things like life and work get in the way. And so the goal is to get back to that. It is to do a weekly live stream come hell or high water. It's to do at least 1 or 2 weekly series that deal with things having to do with small crew production and what we're doing in the industry. But it's not always easy. So right now I'm laying the groundwork for that to be able to happen, and then still be able to continue to create content for my clients, which is really the thing that pays the bills. You know, I love education and I love creating free content, but I also have to do things like, you know, put food on the table, and there's that education thing for my children, and you know, all of that fun stuff, and occasionally take them to Disney or Harry Potter World or whatever that's going to be. So I'm excited about the expansion of what's happening, and part of the goal to move out here was to have a bigger space so that I could create content all around for people that way. But it takes time, and I've learned over the years, and I think it's something I've known for a long time, but I constantly forget, that the runway is always 3 times longer than you think it's going to be. So it's 3 times longer. And while I wanted to be up and running after we moved here last August with content by October or November, here we are in February, and I think we're much, much closer to that, but it does take time. So I've got some exciting things happening, and there's a lot of content that's going to be coming both on my YouTube channel and through social media outlets, but also for the other people that I create content for on a regular basis. And one of the main ones will be ABLE-CINE. So there you go. Then, yes, the raw proxy workflow is okay right now. It can definitely be improved, and I think you'll see an improvement on that in the future. And the C200's you know, it's a strong camera out there. I mean, you have to understand what the pluses and minuses of that camera are, just like you do with the EVA 1 and with the FS7 Mark II and the C300 Mark II, and you know, any of the RØDE cameras that you might be using, and ARRI cameras. They all have pluses and minuses across the boards. Not a lot of minuses on the ARRI cameras, but you know, you can find something with everything. There's no perfect camera system. So, so that's basically the update in terms of what's been going on with me. Lots of plans for content that's coming up in the future, and there's definitely one series that's going to be launched soon, which will be a weekly series. And again, I'd like to do these live streams every week, whether it's here in this studio between one fern, or it is on the road, because I do travel, which also is the thing that gets in the way sometimes. And I just got back from Austin, actually, where I was doing a project for a couple of days, and those things pop up every once in a while, and you know, you got to go where the work is. So any questions that people have that they'd like to ask that are camera, lighting, audio specific, anything having to do with production, that would be great. Yeah, Eric makes a comment about the C200 that he'd like to see a little more from the codec, but it holds up pretty well, and that's in reference to the C200. And I agree. I mean, we would have loved that camera to have been a 10-bit 422 camera internally, at least 10-bit externally in UHD, not just in HD. And, you know, that's always going to be the way. But I think the build quality is great. The ergonomics of the camera work well for a lot of people, not for everybody. And the fact that, you know, you have the option to record RAW internally, where you really bypass all of those shortcomings related to color space and dynamic range, is pretty fantastic. You do that at the expense of a higher data rate, of course, so you have larger files. But there are, at the moment, good workflows in Avid Media Composer, in Final Cut Pro 10, and DaVinci Resolve. Still waiting for native support from Premiere Pro Creative Cloud on that, but I'm sure that will show up in the near future. And it's pretty interesting the way that camera handles the raw files that come in. Essentially what happens is when you bring that in and it's debayered, it gets converted to Canon Log 2, and the cinema gamut in terms of color space. All right. I think we ignore that last comment. Everybody else can read it if they want, but that doesn't really have anything to do with production or anything that we're talking about. So what do we have in terms of other questions that are related to production and anything related to small crewing, which is definitely a focus that I have in terms of the things that I've been dealing with that people have questions about. I'm happy to go over any of those things. And while I'm looking for or waiting for a couple of questions that might come into the chat, I think I'm going to talk to you about a couple of other things. One of the things that I actually brought with me, which is pretty interesting, is I bought on here, and I don't know, Jess, can you go to Amazon and look up film slate and then space 8x7, so 8x7, and see what comes up? Because what I have here is I have an 8-inch by 7-inch small slate here. This is by a company called Newer, which I think it's weird in terms of the spelling. Is it 2 E's? 2 W's? Okay, so yeah, so it's on Amazon. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I do travel a lot, and I do shoot. Oh, Eric, I'm going to answer your lighting question. I do slate all the time when we're doing multicam, and of course, a lot of the cameras that you might be using out there don't have a timecode terminal or port. That's true, actually, of the C200. It's true of all of our DSLRs and our mirrorless cameras. And so I can't really afford a smart slate. So what I have here is this small little travel slate that sits inside of this little porta-brace bag. And you can use dry erase markers. Only use the Expo ones, by the way. This is my second slate because I used El Cheapo ones and it left marks. But this little 8x7-inch slate is a great little slate here. I would not ever rely upon this for color accuracy. Definitely want to roll on a chip chart like the X-Rite video color checker, but there you go. There it is. So, Jess, can you do me a favor and just copy the URL? Oh, you do. You have it there. So you have the name and the link. Perfect. So that's good. So there you go. There's a little slate that you might want to take a look at. Eric's asking, what lights have I been using and liking? Well, I will say that I've been using the Aputure 120D, which is what I'm using here with the light dome. I think it's a good cost-effective lighting solution. I'm still using the Flex lights a lot from Westcott because they pack flat, and I do like flexible LEDs. I thought that LED, by the way, Eric, that you just reviewed recently for a news shooter would look pretty cool in terms of it packing down into almost nothing but giving you that full 2-foot by 2-foot size. Now I'll answer this question. Yes, I am a producer, among other things, like many of us now. Lighting-wise, other than that, when I can, and I do locally because I have a couple of lights, I do use the sky panel lights from ARRI, and I love those. They're not appropriate for every production, but they are pretty fantastic. And I mean not appropriate meaning that, you know, an S60C is not only expensive, but it's also heavy in terms of transporting it. Very reasonable for a rental, depending on what type of production you're doing. And what I love about the sky panel lights from ARRI is they're sort of like the everything light. They do so many different things, and they're so tunable, and they allow you to dial in Lee and Roscoe gels and special effects and source matching for your lighting and things like that. There's some other lights that I'm interested in checking out. I forgot actually it's from, is it Intellitech, I believe it is. There's a new Fresnel LED, which is 800 watt Fresnel LED. There you go, Intellitech. You just said the name of the company, but I had remembered it before you did the post. And that 160 looked really cool. But now they have this 800 watt draw, color tunable LED light, Fresnel, which looks like a beast. So I'm really looking forward to that one, and I want to get that in my hands and see how that performs. I do like the 300D from Aputure, and of course, if you go to newshooter.com, you can see that they have fixed a little issue that they had that sort of happened between their pre-production and their production models, but it's not an issue anymore. So I would use that light on a lot of different projects, especially because of its relatively low power draw, but for an LED light, a 300 watt draw produces a lot of output. So the question is, what type of producer? I'm a content producer, and you know, a lot of the types of content that I create falls within the corporate realm. So it's, you know, corporate doesn't mean conservative. Pretty much any company in the country is a corporation, and if you're doing work for any of those companies, you're doing corporate work. But a lot of the companies that I do work for happen to be within the industry of video production and filmmaking, so I create a lot of content for them, and that's product-based content, product overviews, application videos, educational videos. But then I do stuff for nonprofits, and I also do some commercial work. I actually just bid on a commercial for a national company, so if I do that, I'll be producing that. And I won't be a teacher unless I'm actually doing this for a living. So that's kind of one of my rules, is don't teach if you're not doing. Some people do, and that's okay, but for me, I have to be doing this for a living, especially with the fact that everything changes so fast within this industry. Eric makes a comment about RGB is huge now, and yes, I mean, I kind of talked, Eric and I talked about this last year at Cinegear. Kind of 2017 was sort of the year of RGB, truly color tunable lighting fixtures. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing, you know, that really come to market in a big way. We see it with the light panel Gemini light, which obviously is a light that has an RGB component to it. Cineo Lighting is now in that game. And a lot of other companies. So, Eric, you're here for me, man. Higher resolution or better pixels? Is 8K going to be the next big thing? Well, 8K is going to be the next big thing for camera companies because they need to sell more cameras. But I think, you know, we're always looking for better pixels. Yep. We're always looking for better pixels because right now, you know, I'm going to sort of shift gears here. I think that it might not be higher resolution or better pixels. With the cameras that we have right now in the market, while there could be improvements in terms of what those cameras are and what they can do, the big thing for me is the monitoring solutions. So the area that I'm really looking for the industry to really step up in is in monitoring, because at the moment all of the digital cinema cameras that we have on the market, even, you know, mirrorless cameras are capable of capturing more information in the recorded image than virtually all of the displays that we have on the market are capable of showing us. You know, at best in most display technology, you know, moving from standard dynamic range to high dynamic range, we are looking at about 10.5 stops of viewable dynamic range. That's from your, you know, your blacks down here to your whites up here and all of those steps. And the cameras themselves are capturing somewhere between 12 to 16 stops of dynamic range, and we can't even see those stops on the monitors that we're using. So I think that that is definitely something that we really have to consider. Jess, can you put the link in there for that?
It's 245 characters, and it
It
won't let me.
won't? All right. Well, there you go. There's at least the information on the light panels that we're talking about. So better monitoring. And then the color spaces that we're capturing are also far greater than most of the displays that we have. HDR is a big subject. At its most basic, it has to do with dynamic range, but as an expanded subject matter, it really has a lot to do with not only dynamic range, but color space and a lot of other things, a lot of other ingredients. So for me, it's these monitors that are the problem, you know, and even monitors that are being touted as HDR monitors are still sort of in their infancy. They're showing us more of what the cameras are capturing, but they're not really showing us what the cameras are actually capturing. So I think in the next few years, that technology will evolve. We're already starting to see that Rec. 709 as a color space is, you know, while it's part of what we call the BT 2100 standard, meaning that it's backwards compatible, that color space that we've been using and sort of the basis of all of our HD or high definition content, that the next sort of frontier in terms of color space is going to be probably P3. That's the color space that we use for theatrical distribution. There are, you know, displays now that either support, you know, 90+% or all of the P3 color space. And I think that as content creators, we're going to be looking at P3 as sort of our next targeted color space. And there are lookup tables for P3. Cameras like the C300 Mark II even have built-in LUTs or lookup tables for P3 as a color space. You just need to make sure that you are pushing that image to a monitor that has the support, Flanders Scientific, SMALLHD, some other manufacturers that can actually show you that expanded color space. And then it's going to take a little while for us to get past that sort of 10.5 or so stops in terms of our dynamic range, but eventually we'll get there and we'll start to see not only higher nit value in the monitors that we're using, which is the brightness component of it, but contrast ratio to the point where we can actually see those individual stops. And when that happens, and you know, I've talked to people about this a lot in the past, that's when we're going to start to change the way we light and the way we look at our images in terms of color and also our dynamic range. So we'll see how that all plays out in the long term, but I would say that HDR is a big thing. It's something that we need to consider. But you take a camera like the C200, and if you're shooting with a C200 and you are not shooting in cinema raw light, but you're recording to the internal SD cards, you are in effect using, in terms of color space, not dynamic range, but color space, a Rec. 709 based camera system. So you need to understand that. And it's not a bad thing. It's just not giving you what some other cameras might be giving you in terms of your color space when you're recording internally, like the C300 Mark II, like the EVA 1, like the FS7 Mark II. So you've got to understand what these computers are giving you. What is the manufacturer building that camera for? Who's the market for that camera? I never thought that the C200 would be the camera system that I'd wind up with. I thought it was going to be a C300 Mark II or something, you know, as an expansion to that particular, you know, system. But the reality is that it's the right camera system for the type of content that I'm creating for the majority of my clients. So I can hire, you know, either an owner-operator with a different camera system, or I can rent a different camera system. But I'm creating primarily educational content that goes to the web, and content for corporate clients that is going to the web. And the C200 kind of gives me two options. I can produce, you know, really high-quality content internally to the CFast card in cinema raw light, and I also have the option to have a lighter weight codec, and if I white balance properly and I expose properly, in most situations for the type of content I'm creating, it's going to do exactly what I need it to do. Sup, Chris? Your last name is Cheek, as in like you're cheeky, or it's just cheek. That's what I need to know. I like that though. Welcome. The stream has been solid. I like that. Okay, so this space is going to work. I mean, I'm jacked into a straight Ethernet connection here, and this has been a big problem for me in the past. So the fact that the Mcminnville media community, that's what I call Mcminnville Community Media. Mcminnville Community Media. There you go. Bingo. Is a solution is great, and the fact that I have this in the town that I'm in is pretty awesome as well. I've got a 50 up, 50 down, which is going to allow me to do these live streams. Studio's not very big that we have here. In fact, I can switch over to the other camera so you can kind of maybe get a little bit of a sense. Let's see if it does that. You can sort of see, you know, there's a control room over there, and that's where the end of the room is, and they've got a green screen and stuff like that. I don't know if that was a mistake to switch over to a different camera. That was probably a mistake, but you know, I like to do that kind of stuff. Yes, Chris. So, but big enough probably that if I was doing a live stream and I wanted to just show you guys a pretty simple setup for something, I might be able to do that in the future. I'm also thinking about doing some tests with the Teradek VidiU Pro, and actually being able to do some stuff where I can hook up a better quality, not a web-based camera, to the camera system. And I'm looking right here on the left here. It does actually look like my test with switching cameras held, though you guys will tell me with my stupid 30-second delay if it did. So I just want to find out if there's any other questions before we wrap up this particular episode, our first live stream of 2018 that we're going to start to bring in and be more consistent. For the people that are watching, one question that I have for you is, when should the live stream actually happen? That's really a big one. And I know that answer might be a little bit different for everybody who's on right now. Some people might be in Europe. Other people are on the East Coast. I'm now on the West Coast. So, you know, are we looking at a particular day of the week? Are we looking at a particular time of the day? And if you could just tell me through feedback in the chat, that would be great. You know, I'm on Pacific time, and, you know, this day of the week would be best for me at around this time. You know, and these do get archived, so they can be watched later on, but it doesn't give you the ability to have a live Q&A and really have a conversation, which to me is what live streaming is all about. It's about being able to talk in real time about certain things and do that. So let me know in terms of what times and days work best for you, and then I would open it up again. Good to see you too, Eric, man. I'm sure I'll see you soon. If I don't see you before, I will see you at NAB, and I'm sure we'll be hanging out a little bit, doing weekend workshops the Saturday and Sunday before the show, and then I will be on the floor and hanging out with you guys. So any other questions and any feedback would be great before we wrap this up. Again, we're planning on doing another episode. Are we around next Thursday, Jess? Am I out of town or anything like that? Let's find out what the calendar is. And then the real question is whether or not I can book the studio for next Thursday. So I'm going to try to do that, unless everybody says to me Thursdays suck. But again, I'd like to know what time would work well for everybody. I'm thinking 2 o'clock Pacific time, because that would be 5 o'clock on the East Coast. And we are free next Thursday. And then that would put us at 10 o'clock at night in Europe. And at least if anybody out there is like me, if you're in this industry, you're probably still awake at 10 o'clock. So would that work? I don't know. And 2 o'clock, it'd be an early morning for people in Australia, but I guess they could do it. So I'm kind of thinking around then. So there you go. All right. So I think we're wrapping this up right now. Feel free to visit my website, which is theC47.com. I also have the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/theC47. And if you go to my website, you can ask questions. There's a form there, and I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget that if you like stuff here on the YouTubes, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, because the more subscribers I have, the easier it is for me, trust me, it is, the easier it is for me to create free content for you, the audience, and to be a resource for you related to the craft of video production and filmmaking, and anything else that you want to know about related to production. Earlier than 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so this time. Okay, so let's see how this goes. I'm going to keep the survey going every week. We'll find out from everybody over time what sort of works the best. And I would like to thank Jessica for all of her help manning the computer and making sure that some of those links go out and everything else. And it's going to get better over time, I hope. That's the plan. So thanks, everybody, and I will see you next time on the C47. And I'm going to do this audible for everybody. I don't know if I'm allowed to stop the show or I have to wait for the 30-second buffer, but I'm going to stop it and see what happens, and hopefully it doesn't cut it off. And there you go.